Autonomic dysregulation and post-concussion syndrome. So the autonomic nervous system are all of your autonomic functions, so things that are done automatically. So the ability for your heart to beat a certain way, the ability for your breathing to happen automatically, the ability for various things to go around your body in terms of signaling and things like that. Okay, so it's an autonomic thing. It happens without you having to think about it or control it. You have two different ones. You have your sympathetic system, which is your, what they call it, the fight or flight mechanism. This is your, a bear is chasing you and you have to run away. So what happens is your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, your breathing rate increases, and you go. That's your sympathetic system. Your parasympathetic system is what's called your rest and digest. This is your chill system. So this is when your heart rate is nice and low and you don't have to run away from a bear. These two systems are in balance with each other. At least they should be. If your sympathetic is high, your parasympathetic is low. If your parasympathetic is high, your sympathetic system is low. So they're always in balance. And the thing that's been studied in concussion is generally through heart rate variability, because heart rate variability is the way that your heart rate fluctuates minute to minute, second to second type of thing. And even though if you put a heart rate monitor on and you check your heart rate and your pulse, it'll give you your a rate of beats per minute. So you say, let's say normal heart rate is 72 beats per minute. But within each of those beats, it's actually speeding up and slowing down throughout that 1 minute cycle. So even though over a minute you get 72, maybe, give or take, throughout each of those beats and cycles, it's actually speeding up a little bit. 2 beats are a little bit closer, then the next 2 are a little bit spaced out. And typically, heart rate variability is a sign of fitness and it's a sign of health. People that are healthy and in good shape have high heart rate variability. Your heart rate variability wants to be high. And it responds to things like even the way you breathe in. So if everyone just takes their pulse right now, and you can try this with me. You take your pulse right now, and when you breathe in, take a deep breath in, your heart rate should speed up. And then when you breathe out, you'll notice that your heart rate slows down. So this happens throughout that 1 minute cycle. So this is happening all the time, we don't know it. So this is what's called heart rate variability, and this is a sign of your autonomic nervous system function. After concussion injury, we know that heart rate variability is lowered. So we generally have a high resting heart rate, and because we have a high sympathetic drive. So following concussion, our autonomic nervous system gets out of balance where we have high sympathetic, low parasympathetic. This generally results in things like high morning resting heart rate, reduced heart rate variability, and heart rate variability also helps to control, your autonomic nervous system also controls breathing rate. Breathing rate and heart rate variability can affect the cerebral vascular mechanism, so now you get reduced blood flow to the brain, or at least unresponsive blood flow to the brain, where you're not getting the same fluctuations that you should. That's a whole other topic to get into, but basically your systemic blood flow your cerebral blood flow is meant to be consistent no matter how much change is happening systemically. Your brain always wants the same amount of blood coming into it to compensate for the activity that it's doing. If you have these fluctuations in how you're breathing and your heart rate variability, your cerebral vascular mechanisms become compromised and you're not able to contain that or maintain that consistent blood flow way. So we have affects our breathing rate, okay, sympathetic nervous system, affects our cerebral vascular accommodation. It affects our tolerance to exercise. So when we start exercising, oftentimes people with concussion or post-concussion syndrome will notice that their symptoms get worse when they do any type of physical activity or cognitive activity. This is generally related to a blood flow issue or an autonomic nervous system dysfunction where you're not able to regulate the proper amount of blood to your brain. So if you start exercising and your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, systemically, but your brain can't accommodate that, you're going to have an increase in your symptoms. Now, this is all potentially related to autonomic nervous system dysfunction. A lot of the research that's been done, and this has been pioneered by the University of Buffalo, and this is where you get into exercise testing, exertional testing using a treadmill. There's a specific protocol to follow, and the treatment often for this is exercise done in a steady state cardio, sub-symptom threshold way. So you find out at what point you start to become symptomatic, and we want you to exercise, but we don't want you to exercise up here. We want you to exercise down here so that you're doing something, you're pushing yourself a little bit, but you're not exceeding what your threshold is. And this is the mistake that a lot of concussion patients make. They've heard that exercise is beneficial, but yet when they go out and exercise, their symptoms get worse, which then makes them say, well, I don't want to do that anymore because that makes my symptoms worse. And some of them will just keep pushing through, and that's the wrong approach. And others will completely withdraw, and that's also the wrong approach. What you need to do is have a qualified person do and administer this type of testing for you so that you know where you're at, what your threshold is, and then you can start working on that. So that's always the first step of this. Other impacts from the sympathetic parasympathetic dysregulation, anxiety and mood, and also sleep disturbances. Now, ways to reduce sympathetic and increase parasympathetic. I mentioned the number one, which is exercise in a subsymptom threshold way. Number two is what a lot of people are told to do, which is just relaxation. They're told to meditate. They're told to take it easy. Don't go to work. Don't stress. Don't do anything. But for most people, the fact that you're not able to work and do anything makes you more stressed and more anxious. So that one is difficult for people to generally do. But if you can, meditation, yoga, that type of stuff, any type of relaxation activity, hanging out with friends, that's great for relaxation. It gets your mind off of it and it calms the nervous system down. Overstimulation can make things a little bit worse sometimes. Exercise, like I said, is number one. And the lastly, one that you can start trying to do is breathing exercises. So there's a thing called biofeedback or neurofeedback where you're hooked up to all sorts of monitors and you're looking at a screen of some kind to give you feedback on what you're doing and what its effect is having. And so a particular study that I'm going to discuss here is they were looking at heart rate variability and breathing rates. And so you're hooked up to a heart rate monitor, and the goal was to achieve the highest heart rate variability possible. And they would try to do this with their breathing rate. So as they're breathing in, they're looking at a monitor and they're looking at what their heart rate variability actually is. And so by changing your breathing rate, you're getting instantaneous feedback as to what that's doing with your heart rate variability. And what they found in those studies across, I can't remember how many people, but they found that the best breathing rate to improve heart rate variability, so there's a little nugget for you guys right now, the best breathing rate to improve heart rate variability is breathing between 4 and 6 times each minute. So that's a very slow down breathing rate. Just by breathing slow, and there's another thing called box breathing, you may have heard of that, and that's an anxiety trick for people, and it's the similar process, right? Your box breathing is you breathe in for 4, breathe out or hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, and then hold that for 4, and keep doing that in kind of a box type scenario. This is a little bit easier, not paying attention to the box or holding your breath or anything like that. Try to get yourself to a breathing rate of 4 to 6 breaths per minute. So this is something you would do in a relaxation state. You'd maybe sit down, you maybe want to meditate as you're doing this, and you breathe at a 4 to 6 breaths per minute and try to slow that down. Because what that does is it kicks up your sympathetic and it reduces your parasympathetic. This will improve blood flow, reduce anxiety, and all the other things that high sympathetic drive tends to do.